"You're playing it too safe, Rick. This menu feels dated. We need something bold." That was the line that ended my 7-year journey as executive chef at what used to be the heart of Marlowe's Bistro in Providence, Rhode Island. The words came from Ava Sinclair, the fresh-faced tech entrepreneur who'd bought the restaurant less than a month ago. She wanted Instagrammable plates, trendy fusions, edible foam, the kind of food that looked better than it tasted. And me, I built this kitchen on soul. My name is Rick Romano, 43 years old, third-generation Italian-American, and every dish I ever served came with a memory baked in. The lamb braised with rosemary and juniper, my grandmother's Sunday staple, the saffron seafood stew, my grandfather's coastal recipe from Bari. These weren't just meals. They were stories passed down by hands weathered with time. But none of that mattered to Ava. She wanted flash, not feeling. When she asked for my resignation and my recipes, I didn't protest. I just nodded. She assumed I'd written everything down. I hadn't. Not the real versions. The real magic was never in the measurements. It was in the instinct. As I stood at the bar that final night, bourbon in hand and my knives wrapped tight, I wasn't angry. Just hollow. Like something had been carved out of me. But deep down, I knew this wasn't the end. Not even close. The morning after I packed up my knives, I stopped by the kitchen early, hoping to slip in unnoticed. But that plan didn't last long. Marcus, my sauce chef for the past 5 years, caught me sliding my gear into the back of my truck. His apron still smelled like onions and basil. His face, a mix of confusion and frustration. "Chef, what's going on?" I paused. "I'm out, Marcus. Ava's moving in a new direction. Something flashier." He blinked, trying to absorb the words. "But this place is you. The people come here for your food." I forced a small smile. "Not anymore. It's her restaurant now." He didn't respond, just stared at the doorway like it had betrayed him. That night I sat in my small apartment, flipping through old photos of my grandfather's trattoria in Jersey. Romano's table, back when red, checkered tablecloths and handwritten menace meant something. Back when food was less about trends and more about heart. The nostalgia wasn't sad. It was a whisper. A memory reminding me that I didn't fall into this profession. I was born into it. I didn't come to Providence planning to be a chef. Back then I was at rest, studying architecture. Nights were for washing dishes at a downtown restaurant to cover rent. One night a line cook didn't show. I stepped in. It was chaos. But somewhere between the steam, the sizzling pans, and the rhythm of plating, I found something that no blueprint could match. I dropped out that semester. My dad didn't speak to me for a year. I worked my way up the hard way. 4 kitchens, 10 years, no shortcuts. Then came Marlowe's Bistro, a struggling place with a worn-out dining room and a forgettable menu. The owner back then, Howard Franklin, was close to closing the doors. Instead, he handed me the reins. "Make food that matters," he'd said. "I've got nothing left." So I did. I built a menu around memories. A pork ragu my mother made every Christmas Eve. A citrus olive oil cake we served at family weddings. Dishes that didn't just fill bellies, they filled hearts. And people noticed. First the locals, then the Boston Globe. Then travelers planning dinner in Providence weeks in advance. We never tried to be trendy. We were timeless, necessary. Howard eventually sold the place when his wife fell ill. I didn't blame him. The new owners were a restaurant group who mostly stayed out of my way. For 3 years it worked fine. Until they sold it to Ava Sinclair. Ava was all business, venture capital and marketing metrics. She'd visit during prep hours tossing around words like influencer appeal and brand synergy, asking why we didn't have a TikTok account or a vegan squid ink pasta. I ignored most of it. But I should have seen it coming. 2 weeks before she let me go, I overheard her on the phone. "We're keeping the name for now, but everything else changes. Concept, chef, energy." That was the moment I knew. Still, part of me hoped she'd respect what we'd built. That she'd see the value in something real. She didn't. The night before my last shift, I made every signature dish one final time. Each bite was deliberate, memorized through muscle memory and soul. I didn't need recipes. The food lived in my bones. After closing, I cleaned the kitchen like it was my own home. I left the keys on Ava's desk, along with typed versions of the official recipes, sanitized, simplified, and soulless. The ones we kept on file for inspections and training, not the real ones. The real ones couldn't be printed. They were in how we seasoned the stew differently depending on the shrimp's origin. How we let the lamb rest an extra minute on humid days. how the cake's texture adjusted with a pinch more almond flour when the air got dry. I walked out without a speech. No grand goodbye. Just a quiet exit. The next few days I stayed off social media, kept my phone on silent, walked the streets of downtown Providence, and tried to make peace with what had happened. But peace didn't come. 3 days later, Marcus showed up at my place, still in his kitchen whites, face flushed. "It's chaos," he said. "She hired some guy from Boston, Kevin something. Says he's all about elevated fusion. But the dishes, they're wrong, chef. Mrs. Carpenter sent back her lamb. Twice. That made me pause. Mrs. Carpenter had come in every Thursday for 5 years, always ordered the lamb. Said it reminded her of southern Italy, where she'd once traveled with her late husband. If she noticed, others would too. They've got the recipes, I said flatly. Marcus shook his head. They've got paper? They don't have you. Something stirred in my chest. Not pride, not vengeance, just clarity. There was an empty building downtown, my grandfather's old place. It had sat vacant for years. I still held the deed. Maybe it was time to stop trying to revive what I'd already lost and start building something of my own. For real this time. I turned to Marcus. You looking for work? His eyes lit up. If you're opening a kitchen, I'm in. And I know Ellie and James would follow too. For the first time in weeks, I felt a pulse of purpose. I wasn't done. Not even close. I was just getting started. By the end of that week, the cracks at Marlowe's bistro weren't just visible. They were gaping. I didn't go looking for updates, but the stories found me anyway. Old regulars called. A couple of local food bloggers I'd worked with for years sent quiet messages. "Rick, what happened to the lamb?" One wrote, "It's not the same. The texture's off. And I don't say that lightly." The new head chef, Kevin Langston, some 29-year-old food artist from Boston, had gone all in on modern plating. I saw pictures floating around online, tiny scoops of deconstructed lasagna stacked like Jenga blocks, octopus foam on burnt leek ash, and a risotto that looked like wet chalk on a black slate plate. It was a far cry from what we used to serve. More than one reviewer called it ambitious but confused. But nothing hit harder than the voicemail from Mrs. Carpenter. Her voice, always so sure and pleasant, now sounded disappointed. "Rick, I don't know where you are, honey, but they tried to serve me lamb with beet puree and something that tasted like bubblegum. I sent it back. Twice. I walked out. She paused. It's not the same without you." That voicemail broke me in ways I didn't expect. Mrs. Carpenter had never missed a Thursday night in 5 years. She didn't just come for food. She came for comfort, for ritual, for something steady in a world that changed too fast. Ava Sinclair didn't understand that. Maybe she never would. That Sunday, I drove out to my grandfather's old building on Bradford Street. The paint was peeling. The sign, Romano's table, was barely legible behind sun-faded plastic. But the bones were strong, the brick oven still stood. The windows caught the afternoon light just right, casting that golden glow I remembered from when I was a kid, watching Grandpa roll gnocchi with his calloused hands. I walked inside with a pad and pen. Dust floated like ghosts in the air. I stood in the center of the room and whispered, "What if we brought it back?" By Monday morning, I had already made calls. Marcus, Ellie, and James, my old kitchen crew. All three said yes without hesitation. They hadn't signed anything binding at Marlowe's. Ava didn't even bother with retention offers. She assumed her brand was stronger than loyalty. She was wrong. I called my cousin Anthony Romano, who'd become a lawyer in Boston. I needed to know if reopening the old family spot would breach any non-compete agreement. Anthony reviewed my contract from Marlowe's and called me the next day. "You're good," he said. "They locked you out of Marlowe's bistro. Their concept now is modern fusion small plates. Your plan is Italian rustic family dining. It's not even in the same lane." Relieved, I got to work. We tore out the cracked tiles and replaced them with reclaimed oak, refinished the old marble bar. I pulled out my grandfather's handwritten recipes from the attic, some in faded pencil, others stained with tomato sauce, and began translating them into full menace. No fusion, no foam, just real food, made by real hands. Word started spreading before we even had a sign. Ellie posted a behind-the-scenes photo of the crew fixing up the kitchen, captioned, "Something familiar is coming back to Providence." The post blew up. 2 weeks before opening, I got another voicemail, this time from a local reporter who used to cover the food scene. "Rick, I heard you're back. I'd love to feature your story." Providence needs something real again. I said yes. Not for the attention, but because I knew what that phrase meant, something real again. While we were prepping the new place, now officially named Romano's Table, just like the old one, I heard Marlowe's had attempted a full rebrand. Ava brought in PR firms to spin the failure into a bold culinary pivot. But customers weren't buying it. Their loyal base had left, and the trendy crowd didn't stick around. One afternoon, Marcus showed me a food blog review of Marlowe's latest tasting menu. The food looks fascinating, but lacks warmth. There's no story behind it. It's like a beautiful painting with no soul. That line stuck with me, because it summed up everything I had ever tried to avoid in the kitchen. We opened Romano's Table softly. No billboards, no big launch party. Just good food and familiar faces. On the first Friday night, I stepped out of the kitchen in my old white coat and saw Mrs. Carpenter sitting at the corner table, napkin folded on her lap, eyes misty. "I saved your seat," I said, placing the lamb gently in front of her. She reached for my hand. "Told you I'd know if it wasn't yours." 2 months in, Romano's Table had become more than a restaurant. It was a homecoming for me, for the community, and for the regulars who'd quietly drifted away from Marlowe's after Ava's reinvention. Each night I watched folks walk in with soft smiles and leave a little fuller. Not just in their stomachs, but in their spirits. But peace doesn't last long when pride's been bruised. It started with a cease and desist letter from Ava Sinclair's legal team. Delivered in a crisp white envelope, it accused me of brand dilution and client poaching. I nearly laughed when I read it. "Client poaching?" I muttered, holding the letter up for Ellie to see. "These aren't clients, they're neighbors. Friends. Mrs. Carpenter has been eating my lamb for longer than Ava's been out of college." Still, I wasn't foolish. I sent the letter to Anthony, my cousin turned attorney. His response came swift. "She's grasping. There's no legal case here. Your concept is different, your brand is different, and there's no non-compete clause. But if she's starting with letters, expect more noise." Sure enough, 3 days later, a glossy full-page ad appeared in the local lifestyle magazine. "Experience real Italian cuisine the way Providence deserves it, at the only bistro where tradition meets innovation." The not-so-subtle jab stung a little. Ava was trying to stake her claim as the true heir to Providence's culinary legacy, and she wasn't done. Next came the anonymous Yelp reviews, bad ones. Suddenly we had a half-dozen one-star reviews in a week, all from accounts that had never reviewed anything else, complaining about greasy food, rude staff, and lukewarm pasta. None of it matched our service logs. Marcus, our line cook and part-time tech whiz, did some digging. "They're bots," he told me flatly. "Looks like someone hired a reputation management firm to tank your ratings. IP addresses trace back to a cluster in Chicago that works with restaurants." Ava had moved from sabotage by reinvention to sabotage by proxy. I stood in front of the oven that night, hands covered in flour, thinking hard. I'd seen this movie before. Prideful XX, chasing dominance, mistaking intimidation for innovation. But the restaurant world is like a kitchen. Temperatures rise fast, but cool heads cook best. Let her keep poking. I told Marcus. We'll keep cooking. But I didn't stay passive. I reached out to the Providence Business Journal, not to complain, but to tell our story, not a takedown piece. Just the truth. The piece was titled, "Back to the Table: How Rick Romano Revived a Family Legacy Without the Gimmicks." The article struck a nerve. It told of my grandfather's recipes, our simple dining concept, and how we focused on care over clicks. It quoted Mrs. Carpenter, who described Romano's Table as the place where food still feels like family. And then something unexpected happened. People started coming because of the story. Not influencers, not foodies chasing trends, real people. Some drove from as far as Connecticut just to sit at the Marble Bar and try the braised short ribs their grandmother used to make. A local pastor booked a Sunday lunch for 20 after reading the article. The city council even hosted a community dinner with us. Then came the awards. In late October, we were named Best New Revival Concept by the Rhode Island Culinary Circle. A modest title, but meaningful. They don't hand those out to trendy pop-ups or gimmicky tapa spots. It went to places with soul, places with staying power. Ava must have read it, because the next morning, a sharply dressed man walked into Romano's Table with a clipboard and a neutral smile. "Health inspection," he announced. Ellie raised a brow. "We just passed our quarterly 2 weeks ago." "Random follow-up," he replied. though we both knew that wasn't standard. He found nothing. Spotless records. Proper storage. Staff training logs signed and updated. Before leaving, he looked around the packed dining room and said quietly, "She's not going to beat this." You know, that night Diane, the editor of the Providence Food Digest, left a handwritten card on my office desk. No envelope, no signature, just 5 words on cream stationery of, "Quality doesn't need to shout." I kept that card taped to the wall above my desk. I wasn't running a campaign. I was running a kitchen. A kitchen built on trust, heritage, and the belief that the best meals don't scream for attention. They whisper to your memory. Ava kept trying. Pop-up events, celebrity chef nights, fusion tasting menus with edible balloons. But the more she reached, the more hollow it felt. Her numbers started slipping. Staff turnover increased. Longtime suppliers moved on. Meanwhile, our Thursday nights had a 2-week wait list. By the end of that winter, Romano's table wasn't just surviving, it was thriving. We had doubled our staff. Lunch service was added due to demand. We even started getting inquiries for catering weddings and private events. For the first time since leaving Marlowe, I wasn't just catching up, I was ahead. But with growth came a familiar fork in the road expansion. And this time it was different. I'd been approached by a small group of investors from Boston. They loved our story, the community feel, and, more importantly, the numbers. They wanted to open a second Romano's table in Brookline. Same menu. Same spirit. Just new city. I wrestled with it. Ellie, always grounded, asked, "Do you want more restaurants or more of what we have here?" Fair question. I'd seen what overexpansion did to kitchens, to culture, to relationships. Marlowe's had been a perfect example of that. And yet, the idea of bringing our food to another place, another group of people hungry for that warmth, it tugged at me. So I did what I always did when decisions got hard. I visited Pop's grave. He was buried at Mount Hope Cemetery, beneath a simple headstone that read, "Joseph Romano, he fed as well." I brought him a loaf of rosemary focaccia and sat under the bare tree next to his plot. "Pop!" I muttered. "They want to franchise us." A squirrel darted across the path like it had somewhere important to be. I laughed quietly. "You always said food travels better when someone carries it with care. Maybe I just need to find the right people to carry it." That's when the idea hit me. Not franchising, not cloning, but mentorship. What if we expanded slowly, and only with folks we trained ourselves? People who knew our style, our standards, and our story? And just like that, the Romano's apprenticeship program was born. We brought in 2 kitchen apprentices from Johnson and Wales University and 1 front of house intern from a local community college. I worked with them personally, not just teaching technique, but philosophy. "Don't just serve food," I told them one morning as we prepped for a busy Friday dinner. "Serve comfort. Serve memory. Serve dignity." Word spread. The apprentices were featured in a local piece about youth culinary mentorship. The article called our model, Revival Hospitality, where the next generation learned not just how to cook, but how to care. That's when Ava snapped. She held a press conference. No joke, an actual press conference. Wearing a designer blazer and standing in front of Marlowe's new neon sign, she announced that the restaurant was entering a new chapter of innovation and accused certain individuals of clinging to outdated, nostalgia-based cooking that does not serve the future. I watched it online with Ellie and Marcus over lunch. Marcus nearly choked on his sandwich when Ava dropped the phrase, "culinary disruptor." She's comparing herself to Steve Jobs, Ellie said, blinking. Except Steve Jobs didn't burn the Apple Store down before launching a new iPhone, I added. But things got serious a week later when Ava's head chef, Pablo Ruiz, walked into my restaurant. He waited until the dinner rush had ended and asked to speak privately. In my office, he sat down exhausted. "I can't stay there," he said. "She's cutting corners I'm not comfortable with. Pre-made sauces, frozen pasta, training reduced to 3 days. She's trying to automate creativity." He wasn't asking for a job. He was offering to consult for free, just to stay close to the kind of kitchen he used to love. "I want to cook like this again," he said, motioning toward the dining room. "Not like a machine." I brought him in part-time, leading workshops for our apprentices. He was brilliant, gentle but sharp. Within weeks, he was a fixture. Meanwhile, Marlowe started bleeding. Patrons left quietly. One by one, some returned to Romano's, others tried new places. But they weren't staying at Ava's. Then came the breaking point, a negative expose. A local reporter, one of Diane's former interns, published an article titled, "The Soul of the Sauce: What Happened to Marlowe's." It quoted former employees, disillusioned customers, even Pablo under a pseudonym. The piece painted a picture of a business that had traded warmth for efficiency, heritage for gimmick, and trust for tech-driven flash. Within 2 weeks, Ava suspended brunch service. By month's end, she laid off nearly half her staff. I didn't gloat. Truth is, I felt a twinge of sadness. She'd inherited something remarkable and tried to rewire it without understanding what made it beat. But what she didn't know, what she couldn't know, is that the kitchen isn't just about food, it's about presence. And no algorithm can replace that. One night, as I wiped down the counter after close, I spotted Ava standing across the street. Alone, no cameras, no fanfare. She watched Romano's quietly for a minute before walking away. She never came in. I don't blame her. Some lessons can't be taught. They have to be earned. By spring, Romano's table had become more than just a restaurant. It was a symbol. Local colleges began inviting me to speak on sustainable tradition in modern kitchens. We weren't expanding fast, but we were expanding right. Our second location opened in Brookline with Ellie at the helm, and our first apprentice, Jenna, ran the kitchen like she'd been born into it. People didn't come for flash. They came for comfort, for belonging, for food that told the truth. One Thursday evening, after the last customer had left, I stood in the quiet dining room. The chairs were stacked, the lights dimmed low. I walked over to the bar, poured a small glass of red, and raised it toward the old black and white photo of Pop on the wall. "We did it your way," I whispered, and in that moment I realized something. Legacy isn't built on how loud you are. It's built on what you leave behind for others to carry. In a world chasing speed, flash and trends, doing things with heart still matters. Don't let anyone convince you that timeless is outdated. The truth, kindness, craft, and care never go out of style. If this story touched you, drop a comment and share what legacy means to you. Don't forget to subscribe for more real, powerful stories like this. Sometimes, the quietest people have the loudest impact.